All right. Looks like everything's going good. Dope. So today, we're going to be sort of revisiting our um, entire behavior chain all the way through for all of our mining behaviors because I have discovered some things about faction registers that are actually going to make my life infinitely easier and save me a lot of slots, like internal slots, on all my stuff here, which is going to mean more opportunity for more behaviors, which is going to mean better overall automation. So we're actually going to be doing really, really good right now. So I'm very excited. So let's get into it. So something that I've learned is you can link, at least it seems like you can link using the link function in here. And we're going to go ahead and do it just to see on something. Let's get a unit that we're not really doing anything with here. What has this got set up on it? Okay, so we've got a behavior. So let's go ahead and link here. Let's set a link. And we're going to go from this random faction register. And then we're going to set up a parameter here. And we're going to go to that parameter. And then whenever that parameter changes, we're going to get a parameter event out. We're going to select parameter 1. And when that parameter changes, we're going to copy. So I finally figured out copy is how you set variables. There's no set, it's copy. So you take a value, right? We're going to take the value of P1 and we're going to set it to the visual register. And that should be simple enough just to get us going here to make sure that this link actually works. So then we're going to play that. And that means we're just going to be linking that faction variable. So now we should be able to go in here and go into our faction registers. And I think it was the resource request that I used. So let's go ahead and change this to this right here. And see. Okay. That doesn't seem to be working. That's unfortunate. It does seem like it should. Right? No, I can just consistently copy this. But what I'm hoping to do is set up a one-time, right? I just want this link to get set, and then I don't want it to happen over and over again. Oh, hold up. Is that what the band is for on this? Hang on. So if we set a faction variable, and so we've got a radio band here. When these are set, do they send out on those radio bands? That would be maybe interesting. So mineable 1 is currently set there. So let's actually go. This will be really great because then we can absolutely do this whole thing as an event instead of having to do any sort of consistent looping. And that's so much better. We definitely don't want looping. So we're going to do a radio event. We're going to do on band. Band mineable 1 here. And so we need to make sure whatever signal we get in, we're going to set to a variable. And then we're just going to copy that variable. Actually, we'll just move this right down here. Kill this. We're just going to copy that variable to our visual. And that should be easy peasy lemon squeezy. So hopefully every time this register changes, it'll send out that value. Now I want to disconnect anything that I have that is currently set up to those values. Because something was changing that value. And I want to stop it. Because whenever I take it off or reset it here, it changes. So actually, let's just make a totally different value. But let's just turn this into a +1 here. And that way, let's make sure when I go to my faction register and I clear it. Okay. Oh, no. That's interesting. Why? I must be setting the faction register. That's got to be what I'm doing. Oh, crap. Easier way. Let's just turn everything off. Turn you off. Turn you off. You get... fuck it. You can also turn off. Now let's go to our faction registers. And now let's delete that. Okay, nothing's coming back on. Perfect. So, yeah, I think this sends out as a band. So this is what there was a person named Lightsand yesterday who was telling me about the faction radio. And I think this is the functionality they were trying to get me to use. But I didn't know enough about faction registers until I went in and started like exploring a little bit after the stream yesterday. So I couldn't really act on that idea until I had a better understanding of what was going on. So I thought in order to change faction registers, you actually had to send things on this band. I didn't realize that it was transmitting on this band. So let's change the value, like just to this. And now you can see the visual value here has changed. So it transmits that information out on a band. And you can pull that information by listening to that band. But there's another, so the other thing I want to look at is I want to look at copying a value to that parameter. So let's put a weight in here. And we're going to wait a few ticks. Let's say 10 ticks is 2 seconds. And then we're going to copy the other value. So we're not going to listen for the radio event for this second value. We're just going to straight up copy from the faction register to the visual and see if that works. So we're going to copy from this other faction register, and we're going to put that there. Oh, that can get deleted. Perfect. Okay, so now we've got that all done. And now every time we change this first register, we're going to also grab the value from that second register. And there's a reason I want to do this, and that's because I want to send lots of data at the same time. So if we change that, oh, I set it to the parameter, not to the visual register. But it did actually go in there. So we change this, and the visual register changes, and then it picks up. So I can clear that value, and I can go in here to the faction, and I can change this. So the visual register goes away 2 seconds later, bammo, storage block, done. So this is really, really powerful. Like, holy shit, powerful. Because now I can just be listening for changes to the world around me on certain radio bands, right? So we're going to use a resource request radio band. And instead of, let's make sure that we can change these values based on the copy as well, which I believe you should be able to. But instead of copying the value to our parameter, let's go ahead and copy a random, actually, let's just copy this value. And we're going to set that to the resource request value. So whatever value I set inside of the first, and I think I changed this back, didn't I? Okay. So as soon as no, I didn't. Never mind. So what should happen here is once I change this first value, this should set this value to whatever it is I change it to after a couple of seconds. So we're going to set that, and then bammo, it's set. So this gives me the ability to transmit on a radio band without needing a transmitter. And this is extremely important because A, transmitters have to be unlocked, right? So I've got to unlock. So transmitters are basically useless now. Transmitters are only useful if you're not going... Where the hell are transmitters? Transmitters are only useful if you're not going to... Are they in the advanced? Holy shit, they are. Yeah, so we got to get a long way to get radio transmitters. So these are only useful if you're not going to use the behavior tree at all. And that's... I mean, like, you can do some good stuff with the transmitters that way, but if you're planning on using the behavior tree, then your faction registers are going to be the better way to go about that, and just doing all your transmitting that way. And I'm actually really excited about that. That's going to make a lot of what I'm trying to do much, much easier. Like our scout here, where we have our scout logic, not that logic, where we have our logic where we pick up stuff and then we set transmitter components and we send out this information, and then our map is reading that information. We can now just set up right? This logic still works because it's still running on a radio event. But instead of this scout needing a transmitter to send that radio signal out, we're just going to go ahead and copy whatever the value is, right? Whatever the resource is here. We're just going to copy that value to a faction register. And then this dude's just going to read it. And then we're good to go. And then every time that faction register changes, this dude just reads it and updates the map. And that's going to be perfect. And then we'll set up, we've already got this one down here where we're listening to see if people need resources. If they need resource locations from the map. And so we'll be able to just do that too. So this is going to be really, really event driven. And that's really cool. Now there is something I want to check here. Somebody was telling me something about a locked version of the game and an unlocked that had something to do with like how many actions happen per tick and stuff like that. I don't really understand that, and I'm on a dedicated server right now. I don't know how to check if I'm currently locked or unlocked, but I want to see. Because I want to know a little more about that. Because I want to know I want to know what's going to be better for the competition, is locked or unlocked. So I don't really know. Lots of stuff we got to look at, lots of things we got to learn. This game is extraordinarily deep and complex. Right on the surface, it's just an RTS factory builder game. And if you play it that way, and if you play it manually, and you just use, these exposed parameters and registers, and you just use the linking system, and you do a little basic automation that way, this game can be really, really fun and fairly easy to get into. But if you want to get into the behaviors, and you really want to drill down on some of the different settings and stuff like that in this game, it is fucking complex. Like, oh my God. You can see I haven't gotten anywhere in this game, right? I've just been bumping into problem after problem after problem, learning and learning and learning all these new things about how these different parameter nodes work, behavior nodes work. And it's been super fun. Like, I think you could get a PhD in this game. And I think you can enjoy the game at all tiers up to that point as well. So you've got this crazy opportunity to just play this game at really any tier of gameplay that you might be interested in. So we're going to want to redo our scout logic. We're going to get rid of our transmitters. So we no longer need to transmit these values. So we're going to go ahead and delete that. And instead what we're going to do is we're going to copy. I wonder if I can make the value. Okay, I can't make a new faction register inside of this. So I need to make it here. So what I want to do is I want to go manage faction registers, add new register. And I want to set things up a little bit differently here. Do I have a scout? Is there like a scout? This is a scout object. Or no, this is your command center. Well, this is good enough. we'll use this robot as our scout here because it kind of looks like a scout. And so this is Scout 1. And we're going to call it Scout resource. So this is the scout finding a resource, and it sets that to that. So we no longer need on our scout this very useless transmitter here. So we can get rid of that. My mute button broke again. Anyway, so we can get rid of that. And now on our worker, we also are no longer gonna need a transmitter. So all of this logic, well, a lot of this logic is gonna go away. But now we're gonna be listening on that Scout 1 band here. And then we just do the exact same logic, right? We just save this into the index so that we have a register of our resources here, which feels good. So boom shakalaka. So now we've got our scout and our map working much, much better. Now, eventually my map, I think, is actually going to go ahead and be like a building. You know, I want lots of internal slots. I want, you know, maybe some higher visual range. I want, you know, I need to find a good building to turn into like a good command building, like a logistics and command building. So we'll look into that. I sort of want something that's maybe mobile, so I might stick with a worker or an engineer, or something like that, because having something that's mobile could be nice so that I can escape bad situations. But we'll see. We'll have to look into that stuff. But let's see here. So this worker should be working better. This worker should no longer need this radio transmitter. So let's put it away. Honestly, I should probably just destroy all my radio transmitters because they are useless. If you're going to use behaviors, I cannot think of a use for a radio transmitter when you can just copy values to faction variables. That doesn't make any sense to me. So, and because you can read those faction variables as radio signals, you also never need receivers because you can just do that stuff right in the behavior, right out of the gate from moment one. So I like that a lot. So yeah, which means that our logic for this now needs to change pretty significantly. So right now we're figuring out, oh no, I did set this as a copy value. So this is my new logic for receiving resources. So previously I was figuring out like how many resources did I need, and then choosing to send out that information. And so now the next thing I want to do is I don't want to be bringing back, hey, you really enjoyed this stream, definitely be back to watch your next one, add me on Discord. No, you're a bot. Um, okay, so the next thing I want to do is I don't want to bring back more resources than my storage structure actually needs. Um, so I have here that I'm looking at my slot. So I'm getting my inventory item in my index, and then I'm writing that into a variable. And then I'm getting the number of slots available, and then I'm getting the max stack of that item here. And then I'm multiplying the max stack by the number of possible slots. And then I'm getting a result which says this is how many resources I can have inside this storage facility. And then I am reading the total resources or the total number of things inside that storage. And then I'm comparing those values. If those values are equal, then we go back and we check it again. And if those values are not equal, then we send out an APB here on we need some resources. And then we get a reference to ourselves, and we'll copy that self-reference to the resource requesting value, because we're actually going to read this value so we can get the reference to this structure for our gatherers. So that our gatherers only gather for things near them. Now, I don't know if I want to do this off of my program start here. It seems probably okay to run this off of the program start because this is just a storage facility, right? It only cares. I do think maybe waiting, right? So we hit the program start and then we hit a wait for like a bunch of ticks, like minutes. And then we only check every minute or two if we need more resources. Because I don't think, checking every however long it takes to run this is not necessarily important. So I think hitting a big old wait here right at the beginning will probably be good. We could also hit the wait on the if equal so we know, like, hey, this has plenty of resources, so we're good. The other thing we could do is we could take this logic about requesting a resource and we could hook up a parameter that says, so this logic here could put the comparison result into this right here, or we could just constantly be checking how many resources we have, right? So we could just check inventory total every minute and dump that into a parameter. And then when that parameter changes, right? So it's not just giving the same value. When it suddenly gives a different value, then we could run as an event this check and see, okay, how many resources do we have? How many resources are we short? And then if we need more resources, send out that APB. So that would significantly reduce the amount of stuff that we're doing per loop of this code here. And I honestly kind of like that. I honestly kind of like that. Now, here's a big question. So if I have this locked, right? So right now, all these storage spaces are locked to a certain value, to a certain resource. So I want to see, actually, we want to get max stack. I'm going to break this right here. We're going to get the inventory slot, and then we're going to get the max stack. We're going to count slots also, but that's fine. And then we want the max stack to go to the visual. And the index I want to do is actually going to be slot 8. Because I know that that one doesn't have anything in it. And we're going to save that, and we're going to run it real quick. Okay, and it can hold 20, and it even tells me the type of resource because it's locked. And that's pretty cool. So I get the resource type and the value. Yo, what's up, Master of Light? That's really dope. Okay. We can go ahead and relink that. And stop the program. And take this back to 1. So even if, in this case, everything is empty, it'll still figure out what the value it needs is. And that's important. Oh shit. We're comparing D and E. Max stack must be B. Okay. I need to start labeling my fucking variables. I'm so bad. My code is so sloppy, dude. So sloppy. It's a good thing that this visual scripting language is honestly pretty nice. Because, you know, it kind of tells you what all these variables are for and stuff. So even if you're a sloppy piece of shit like me, you can just kind of figure it out. And it's not too hard. But I'm sure as my programs get more and more complicated, that's going to change. For fucking sure. Okay, so we have made some really cool discoveries here. And this is going to end up working really well. So if we look at our engineer who needs to get rid of all of this garbage. And get rid of all this garbage. And actually, I'm going to need the capacitor because I need him to be able to go outside of the logistics network. So let's take a look at the code that we wrote for this dude. And it gets a little fucking hectic. Now, this code up here is just it going to drop off its resources. This is its mining code. So this is repeatable. This is actually in a good spot, sort of. Some of our destinations and stuff are going to need... actually, I don't think I need this move to. Yeah, I think I just put this in here to test it. That can go. Okay, so it's just constantly checking while it's mining. They added the new boss. Yeah, they should have added 2 new bosses, right? Havenheith just launched today. So they should have added the Dreadmole or the Dreadhog and the Giant, right? Because today was the first like section of Havenheith. I was really looking forward to playing Havenheith, but I refuse to support that game anymore. I'm donezo. I will not be a party to that sort of deception. Okay. So now, what is all this shit? What is all this shit? I think we just kill this whole fucking thing, if I'm being honest. Because this is all stupid garbage. Boom. Dead. Delete it. Honestly, don't even think we need these parameters. We may need to set up some parameters at some point. But for now, I think we're okay. The other thing that I also maybe want to do is right now we have this looping mining behavior, but I don't actually necessarily want to run this as the main part of the miner. What I might want to do is we keep running these checks to see if we have the resources. So we actually have a really great spot here with this drop off items where we can exit this behavior. And so a unit can only be running one behavior per behavior controller at a time. So if we make this a callable behavior, and instead of running this as part of the main behavior, we call it as part of one of our events, then we can set this up as a behavior that the bot like sort of moves into. And then once it does its delivery, we can just exit that behavior and it'll go right back to the primary behavior. And I think that's actually probably a good way to go about this. They released 110 Hunter also. Yeah, that should have they should have dropped a bunch of new stuff for woodcutting. They should have dropped the new first part of Havenheith. They should have dropped 2 new bosses. They should have dropped the update to 110 Hunter that is also going to include like super big game hunter or whatever, where you're like being hunted yourself instead of hunting things. I mean, today's update was supposed to have an absolute mess ton of shit, but I can't. I mean, I was so excited, and I'm really disappointed not to be in there day one racing to go try and like get the first pet and stuff like that from some of the bosses. I was going to have a lot of fun with that, and I would have just stayed up all night last night and waited for that to happen, but yeah, that's because fuck them. And I don't even care that the price went up $1, right? That's fine. But the way they took away the grandfathered rates from so many players, and the way some people have lost like banked subscription time because of some of the changes that they made is absolutely unacceptable to me. You promised those people that if they maintained a subscription, their grandfathered rates would stay active. And then without giving them a warning, You took their grandfathered rates away because they weren't on the 1 month recurring subscription, even though they had an existing active subscription, which you explicitly told them would maintain that grandfathered rate. And that is wrong. You lied. You stole from those people. Fuck you. And I won't play your game. They didn't get rid of the 12-month. You could still buy the 12-month subscription. But if you were on the 12-month subscription and you had a grandfathered rate for the 1 month subscription, you just lost your grandfathered rate. And they didn't give you any warning. And they didn't allow you to decide to go back to your grandfathered rate. They didn't give you a month worth of leeway. They didn't anything. Completely without notice, they just took that away from those people. Something that people have been spending hundreds of dollars every year to maintain, or $100 every year to maintain over the course of potentially fucking decades. You just took that shit away. You can't do that. You have to give some sort of notice, and you have to allow those people to make that decision. And if you don't, you're a pile of shit. And I won't play your game. And so, unless they give those people their grandfathered rates back and return any of the subscription time that had been banked and got lost in all those changes, then I won't be going back to RuneScape ever again. And I don't see that ever happening. I don't see them ever returning those grandfathered rates because I don't think enough people have put the financial squeeze on them for them to decide that it's worth it. I think they're planning on, the new content and stuff that's coming out this year and some of the FOMO and stuff to drive people to say, well, it didn't really affect me. And I really want to play this content. So I'm just going to keep playing. And that's fine. I mean, that's a personal decision. Everybody's got to make that decision for themselves. But my line in the sand is when you lie to people like that, I don't play your game anymore. And so I won't be going back. And instead, I'm going to play this play-by-programming game because it's super fun. And I'm really enjoying it. I also am just kind of deciding live service games are becoming a pretty massive cesspool, in my opinion. Not the developers who make the games necessarily, but the publishers who control a lot of the financial decisions of those games, right? The investors, the people who are trying to make money off of live service instead of just making good live service games, make a lot of really bad decisions that ultimately hurt the players. And so I'm really starting to think that playing live service games in general is just a bad idea. And that instead, I want to look for games like Desynced, like Roamstead, like a lot of games that are coming out now, especially by indie devs, who don't have the ability to maintain the infrastructure of a live service system. And so instead, they're using a smaller dedicated server system where you can make your own servers of the game And then, they have mod APIs so you can change the game. And then, you've got public server lists where you can, have open servers and do all of these other things. Um, and I think that is probably a better direction, in my opinion, for me to start playing. I would rather, host a dedicated server for my small community. I would rather, just play with people who stop by the stream. I'd rather have my own little world to live in and play in and do that stuff in and share that with people instead of going to some live service route and having to deal with, garbage MTX and bullshit predatory monetizations and all of that other stuff. Um, because you can't find a game company that is just trying to make a good game. There's always, you can't find a game company that's making a live service game that's just trying to make a good game. You always end up with some investor or some group of investors in the background trying to suck that game dry and get every drop of profits that they can out of it, regardless of how it affects the gameplay. It's short-term vision on a system that isn't designed for short-term, right? Live service games are designed for long-term. And so if you get somebody in there who's only got short-term monetary gain as their focus, and you're trying to make a game that's supposed to have long-term appeal, those two ideas clash in the most fundamental way, and you just end up with garbage. And so I think I'm probably going to start looking more for games like this, right? I'm hosting this server right here. And I'm looking for other people who want to join the server and who want to help me automate the game and build like a little team and then like compete with other people who are also automating the game. And when Roamstead launches, I'm going to do a dedicated server for Roamstead and we're going to play that. And that's going to be really fun. And so we'll still get that appeal of having other people around to play with. But we won't have to deal with the garbage MTX live service system. Instead, we just, pay for the hardware or whatever we need to pay for to host the server. And then that's it. But let's see. So we've got this working now, right? Where, yeah, it's sending out all the data that it needs to. So now we need to go over here to our engineer and we need to look at what we need to do based on events. So we're first going to look at an event. We're going to get a radio event. And this radio event is going to be on that mineable resource band. Right? Is that the proper band? Let's go make sure. What band are we kicking this data out on? Let's see, resource request value. So we go into our faction, registers, resource request. Okay, we want to set that up right here. Boom. So resource request band right here. So when we go in here, we are on the resource request band. which is that band right there. And whatever signal we get is going to be this A variable. And when that happens, what we need to do is we need to pull the reference from the value that got sent. So let's go back here because we want this to happen real quick. So it sends out so this is kind of bad because it's going to send out that it wants this resource, then it's going to get a reference to itself, then it's going to send out what itself is. So we actually need to switch this because if we wait to get our reference for ourself until after we send out this request, then this reference to self isn't going to be in the requester variable early enough. So now we send, and then one tick later we send, and we already have that self-reference. Hopefully that'll work. So we're coming down here, we get copy, the resource requesting, the resource requesting unit, whoops, and then we put that as this right here. And so now we get a request for a specific resource and we get what that resource is. So now I actually want to go ahead and I want to put these, I want to link these right up here to these parameters and I want to see how this works. So we're looking in here, nothing's really going on. We're going to play this. It's going to realize, hey, I need a resource. And then it should have the other thing in parameter 2. Let's see. Okay, see, so something isn't quite registering there. Because it's not, the requesting unit value is set, but I'm not seeing it here because it's not happening fast enough. So let's delete both of those. See, so now, that's funny. We need to stop these for a moment. Let's clear these values. Let's stop that for a moment. Whoops. Did I not stop that fast enough? Nope. Okay. So we've got all those going. So we can now play. Oh, I didn't click play on this one fast enough. So these registers got set. So we also need to do some stuff in here. Where we flick the register on and off. This is interesting. This is an interesting problem. Because if something goes wrong, if something isn't read properly or read in the right amount of time, then things can start to get really wonky. And you things get more and more difficult to control the timing of, the longer your program chains become. And so we really need to be careful about using little things like wait and stuff like that to try and make things happen on the right timings. Because if we do that, eventually those waits can compound and other bullshit. And then things just get broken and don't really work right. So let's see if we can figure out a way to work with this. Let's find out. So, regardless of what's going on with the engineer here, so here's the problem. If we flick it on and then flick it off, that changes the parameter again. Right? So anytime you turn the parameter off, you're going to be re-triggering this radio event. And we don't want that. In fact, we don't want this person to be listening to this radio event at all. Once it triggers, we want to shut that down. Because if we're listening to this radio event, it interrupts other things that we're doing. So there might be a couple of things that we need to put into callable things here. Interesting. So, like, for example, when we get this radio event and then we get the value of the character that sent the radio event, we could actually have some fun here. So when you make a behavior, these parameters belong to the behavior. They don't belong to the unit. They belong to the behavior. And they are exposed, and you can actually use these behaviors as inputs for methods. So you see, I've got this saved right now, and I've got these two parameters up here. But if I was to call this particular subroutine, which is the minor fulfillment, which is in here, if I call that, you see hold up. These are outputs now. Oh, wow. Okay. So these are even more powerful than I thought. Because right now, we're reading a parameter value. So, sorry, we're reading a variable value into the parameters. And so it's making them outputs. And I can actually rename these, and you'll see it change. So, resource needed. And then we'll save that. And then we'll recall this. And now we have a resource needed. And it's actually an output because we're putting it because we're calling, right? We're calling a variable from inside our behavior, and then we're pushing that variable out to be exposed. If instead we were doing it in the reverse, right? If we didn't have this, but instead we were pulling that parameter, but instead we were pulling that parameter into an input, like this one right here, then that would actually reverse this, and it would put this as an input. So if we close this down and we call this again, well, we need to save. So if we put this down and we call this again, now we have an input and an output. And so these parameters can be run as exposed parts of a method. And so when you put them inside of other logic, then you can run where you take certain info in. And then you put certain info out. And I think that's going to be super important and a lot of fun to fuck with. So you're going to be able to make, little methods and stuff. So I want to turn this whole mining thing into a method. I want to turn this into a method. So instead of outputs here, I actually want these to be inputs to a method that runs based on getting this radio event. So I'm going to want to get both of these as variables, and then I'm going to want to call a method that allows me to identify what the resource is that I need to go get, like the resource location. And that method's going to have an output for that resource location. And then it's going to put that output into a miner method. And this method is going to run until it goes and drops off at whatever the destination is that came from here. Right? So we're going to have tons of like input and output chaining here into different methods. And the reason that's important is because if we're in some other method, then we're not in this method, which means if I have stuff going on, like my program is running or, I'm listening to radio events or whatever, it should stop me from triggering these radio events while I'm actively running through this. Whereas this radio event would actually probably interrupt, my mining and stuff like that. Hopefully my thought is that this behavior here, the entire thing, will go dormant while I'm in a called method behavior. Hopefully. Let's actually, okay. So when I call this, I want to see if there's anything about like synchronous or anything like that. I don't see anything about any synchronicity. So yeah, my hope is that this behavior will just supersede this behavior completely. And if that's the case, then we'll be in a really good spot. In a really good spot. And we're going to start using that pretty heavily. As we've learned a couple of important things here, arrays, super important. Learning about faction variables faction registers has been really important. And now understanding how these parameters work for exposing input and output variables to different calls is also turning out to be super important. And just those three things will really elevate our logic. But it does mean, I mean, there's just so much. It is really daunting. I have a really big problem where my brain sees what I'm trying to do as an end goal and doesn't see the small steps to get there. And so I get overwhelmed really easily with the big picture instead of being able to focus on the small steps to reach that picture. And it gives me a little bit of paralysis sometimes when it comes to trying to do things. But we're working. We're getting there. The next thing I think I want to do here is I actually think I just want to break this off and set up a quick little mining script here. So we're just going to copy this. And then we're going to leave. We're going to set up a new behavior that we're just going to put in Hermit's work in progress. And we're going to go... What is this? Oh, this is that thing I was using for that other thing. Never mind. Create a new behavior. What is this? This was just some test bullshit. Honestly, I can just delete this. Delete that behavior. So we've got a brand new behavior. This is going to be mine and drop off. And it's a really simple behavior, right? This is not super complex. But something we do need to do is we need to set up a parameter. We actually need to set up two. And we're going to call this one. This is going to be resource coord. So this is the coordinates of the resource that we're after. And then this one is going to be drop off location. And so this is going to be the reference for the building that called this particular resource that made this request. And then this is going to be the resource coordinate that we're going to get from our map to decide, okay, this is where we need to go. So then we're going to check, right? Do we have a mining component? If we have a mining component, then we need to set, not get. We need to set to that component from our resource. We're going to set that to our mining component register 1. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're not getting. We're setting to mining component register 1. Oops. So this will set these. And then we're going to check space for item, which is where we need our getter from. So now we're going to go ahead and set get here. So once we set our value to go to this location to mine this resource, that's going to change both of the parameters of this miner. And the first parameter will be set to the location we're going, and then the second parameter will automatically set to the type of resource that we need. And so then we'll get from component what we want to get is we want to get from our miner register 2, and that value is going to get triggered here. And then if we have space for that value, we just keep mining and keep checking over and over again. And if we don't, then we drop off at this location. So we drop off, check space is fine. We need to copy this one. And this needs to go to there. And I don't even think we need C. Nope. So this is the only variable we even need in that whole thing. And this is a really simple miner script, right? We're just going to the location that we were given. We're mining until we don't have any space left, and then we're returning to drop off the resource to wherever was calling for that resource. Real simple. Not a problem at all. And then once we drop it off, we're actually going to exit. And this will run that same mining script regardless of what type of miner I'm using, right? This is for a laser miner tool. This is for a regular miner. If there's another type of miner in the future, then we'll also try that. But now we're not setting anything from anywhere else. We're using these parameters. We're checking faction registers. So this should all work really well across pretty much infinite distance. So we want to go ahead and save that. And now we have that code that can go into our engineer here. So we're no longer running this. Right? So there's nothing happening on our main loop here, which is awesome. Because the less stuff that we run off of the main loop, the better. Our main loop needs to be as sparse as possible. We want to be doing stuff based off of events as much as we can, because that gives us a lot more flexibility, and it means that we don't interrupt our main loop and maybe cause issues. So we're going to check this radio signal. We get the resource we need. Then we check this signal and we get who is asking for that resource. Now, right now, this isn't working. We're going to have to find a way to speed up how we do that. What we might go ahead and do is, if we're going to be triggering that, this is perfect. So we're going to be triggering this request, and we know we're going to be triggering this request. So invert these. We're going to change this register, but nothing is listening to this register, right? This is a register that we go out and pull from when we need it. It's not something that we're listening to changes on. This is how we're listening to changes. So we get self, we set self to the register that says, hey, I'm the one making a request. And then we make the request which triggers the automatic behavior of this right here. And so now, when it makes a request, this is already populated, so I can pull it. And we actually aren't going to be putting these in parameters. We're going to be putting these in variables because we're going to be using them as inputs to other called behaviors, right? So one of the things that we're going to be calling is that mine and deliver subroutine. And so this is the drop-off location right here, right? We pulled it. And so now we know in this subroutine, this is where we're dropping off. So that's good. And now we need to make another new subroutine that is going to go through the effort of pulling the resource coordinates that we need to go mine. And so that's a pretty simple one. We've already kind of done it with the radio transmissions. We're going to need to set up a new faction. Register here. And this is going to say map resource request. So this is the register that you're going to use if you want to make a request for a resource location. And we're going to put that on mineable 2. Resource requesting unit can go to, we'll put it as robot 2. We don't actually need resource requesting unit to have a band at all, but I don't think that I can just close this band. Unfortunately, I don't think I have the option to just clear it. But that's fine. This is the unit that is requesting the resource. And so now when we make a map request, we don't have any current value here. Yeah, so we're making a request to the map, and we're going to do that in another brand new behavior here. And this behavior is going to be called resource map request. So when we make a resource map request, we're going to need one input. Hey, what's up, Ergith? Welcome to the chat. Welcome to the channel. How are you today? So into this particular behavior, we need one input, and that's going to be the type of resource that we need to find. And then we're actually going to go ahead and send out on the radio. We're going to copy. From this parameter to the map resource request. So we're going to pull in the parameter of the type of resource we need, and then we're going to send out an APB on that. I also maybe feel like this should be on the building. In fact, I know it should be on the building. Definitely. It should be on the building. Yeah, so we put out the APB here, and then we're going to be looking to read back a response. Ooh, this is great. I didn't even realize. But because we're going to be in a called system here, we're going to be sending out like, hey, I'm asking for this resource. And then we're going to be able to put an event, right? So we're just going to be inside of this program until we get a radio event that we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another register here. And this is going to be map resource answer. And so then we're going to put this as number 3 here. Dope. And now we're going to listen on that band inside of this program that I'm making. So we've got map resource request, and now we're going to list, right? So we send out, hey, we need a map resource location. And now that we're sending that out, we're going to listen for a response. And whatever that signal is, we're actually going to output because that's the location. Now, on top of this, because we need to be able to find the closest location to the requester, we're also going to get a reference to self. And then we are also, so we need, hang on. So we have 2 options here. We have a resource request unit here. And we can put ourselves there. Or we can make a new variable that is a map request unit. Now, the reason I'm going to elect to make another variable that is just triggering who the requesting unit is because eventually we want this to automate expansion as well. And so if we have lots of things sending out requests for all sorts of different stuff, then we want to break those requests up as much as possible so that we don't get any overlap, so that somebody doesn't get missed. So we're going to go ahead and trigger that here. Eventually, we're probably going to want to start just saving these into an array and then using that array, right? Looping that array constantly. And so that way the array can be empty or, and that'll mean that we're not doing anything. And we're definitely going to have to do that, especially for this map request unit. It's definitely going to have to be looking through. So all of these triggers are going to be putting things into an array, and then we're going to loop to solve all of those problems eventually. For now, we just want to get it kind of working. Yeah, so the map request unit is this well, we're writing the program down in here. So resource map request. So we're ourself, and then we're sending out, we're copying a version of ourself to this map request unit. And then we start listening on map request answer. And whatever the answer is, we put into parameter 2 here. And that exits a value. So we're going to save that. We're going to go over here to our storage, and we're actually going to change this quite a bit. So instead of putting out an APB requesting a resource here, we're actually going to send out that APB as this function call, right? So we actually don't need this reference to self. So we just want to call this right here. So if we don't have a resource, if we don't have enough of a resource, what we're going to do is we're going to get a resource map request. And what we're going to input is the resource we want, which is that right there. And then what we output is going to be the coordinate location of that resource, which we will save to a variable. Right? So we don't have enough, we don't have enough, we don't have it, or so we don't have enough. Sorry, we do have enough, we repeat. We do have enough, we repeat. We do have enough, we repeat. And then we send out a map request. And then if we don't have enough, we send out a map request. And this is that. And so once we get this back, right, we're told, hey, here's where you go. This is the closest resource to you. Then we make a call to the gatherers to go get that resource. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to pull that self. I guess I could have just put this in the middle of some stuff, but that's fine. So we're going to call that self. And we're going to get that. And then we're going to copy self to that same other. So this is a map request. These are the resource requests. So we're going to copy that to resource request unit. And then we're going to copy this value, which is the coordinate location, to the resource that we're requesting. So we're requesting right now, hey, we want this resource. Somebody go get it for us. And now all of our engineers are still listening, right? They pull that value in. They get the value of the person requesting, and they get the value of the resource that they want to be going after. And now we can just dump resource coordinates in there. And now they know, and they've got their drop-off location because they've picked it up. And so what's going to happen is we're going to stop listening on this resource request band because we're going to move into this right here. So hopefully this won't get interrupted. And there's a way that we can check that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to put it right there. Oh, you know where we're going to run into a problem here? We're going to run into a problem. I don't think I have the resources. I need some more crystal. So the issue we're going to have here is if two storages that want the same resource go in, then they're not going to change the control value or the faction value here. So in order to change that, I can do a couple of things. I could use a random number generator, which would allow that, right? I could change the value that way. Let's see. I really want to find a way. I really think that I actually need to make this a parameter, right? I need to check the value and then put how much I need in a parameter and then use a parameter event. So that way, if it doesn't change, we don't keep triggering it. Yeah, there's definitely going to need to be a refactor to this logic, but for now, it'll probably work. I think this is what I need to do. Yep. Dope. But because I don't have that set up yet, I'm actually going to feed this the same logic, but I'm going to feed it the same logic and then change it a little bit. Is it request resource? Is that what I want? Yeah. So we're going to lock. The other one is locked to all metal, but I don't want that. I want to lock it to crystal. Can I just copy that? Whoops. Okay, figured it out. So now this is locked to crystal instead. So now we're going to see how much crystal are we missing, not misting. And then instead of asking for an ore, we're going to ask for crystal. And this can all be saved as a blueprint. And we should be good. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. I'm going to trigger this one and let it request a resource. And that'll be fine. So we can play this one. We've got our map, right? Is this our map? This is our map. Our map isn't actually done. Okay, so we're not done yet. Because we don't actually need this loop signal. Because we're listening. So this band is now going to be listening to resource request 3, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go check. Map resource request is number 2. Okay. So this is now going to be listening on map 2. Nope. Fuck. Wrong one. Ugh. I'm going to break so many things. So we're listening on resource 2. And that's giving us the variable or the thing we want to check. And so when that happens, we want to copy Don't need either of those. So when that happens, we want to copy from map recess request unit to a variable. And then, because now we have the reference to the requesting person, we can go in here and we can loop through our ID of all of our resources. And then we can check the value that we get from the resource that we're looping. We can check that against the value of the variable we need. So we're looking to see if it's the same resource here. If it is the same resource, then we check the distance between the target location and the unit, which is actually G. So between the target location and the unit that was looking for the resource, if that distance, so we pull that distance, right? How far away are they? And then we compare that versus a parameter that we put in. And so if the parameter is 0, oh, I fucked up. So nothing is smaller than 0. So this parameter starts as a null value, and that's bad. Where, okay, value, the value to check with, the number to check against. So we're checking this number against this number. And if this number starts as 0, then we never actually set anything to the parameter. Interesting. Because this was working. So maybe null just always works. Maybe. We'll see. But then as soon as so this is looking for the closest resource of the type of resource that they were asking for. And then once it finishes that, it sets a value. So what we're looking for here is we're actually going to change this to map request answer instead of, oh, no, that one is map request answer. And all we want is whatever the parameter value ends up being when we're done. And then I don't even think we need that. So now we're just sending back an answer like, hey, this is your closest resource. And I think that should work. So we have our map working. We've got our engineer working. And now we just want to say, hey, we need resources. And you know what probably happened? Map resource request was for Crystal. That doesn't make any sense. Oh, yes it does. Because I'm an asshole. Well, either way, something is broken. So we put out a map request for a resource, but we didn't get an answer. Why is there a visual? What are you even doing? Okay, well, I've done something wrong. I've actually done a couple of things wrong. Oh, my miner wasn't playing. I had already turned it off. Whoops. Well, let's turn this dude back on for a second. Let's see. And then we'll go in here and we'll clear all these variables. We'll clear this variable last. Okay. It looks like somewhere something isn't working. That's fine. We have pretty much completely changed how all this works. So the first thing we need to do is this has been altered to look for a different resource or to request a different resource because I changed it for this one. And I forgot that because they're on the same code, the instances all change together. So I'm going to have to write like 2 versions of this code or find a way to input this based on what the resource here is. Which is fine. I could probably figure that out. But we'll have to do that. So we've got that fixed. So let's step through this. We figure out what's in the first. And then we check how many storage slots we have. And then we get the max stack based on the resource that we have. And then we multiply. And that figures out how many resources we can hold. And then we check how many resources do we have. And then we compare those. If we have less than our maximum resources, we send out a call saying, hey, I need a resource. When we go in there, what we do is we get ourselves and we send that to the map request unit. And then we send out a map request based on that parameter that we pulled in. And then we wait. Oh, I know what was happening. Boom. So then we wait for that data to come back to us. And as soon as we get that signal, we upload that signal to parameter 2 and we exit. So now we have a reference to the location that we need to be going. And then over here, we get our self-reference again. We copy that value to the resource request unit. And then we copy from the output of this map request to the resource request. And then we put out on that band, like, hey, I need a resource, which is dope. This should be, I think, working. So here we receive, hey, I need a resource. I need this kind of resource. And we say, okay, who are you? And then we go over here and we copy map request unit to a value. Great. Then we loop through our memory for the resource that was asked for. So we compare, yeah, right. So we loop through the memory and we pull all the resources in our resource array. And we compare that to the value of the resources we were told to look for. And then if those values are equal, so if this is the type of resource that they were looking for, then we get the distance. And then we do some distance comparing. And then once we're done, whichever one was the closest resource should end up here. Let's make sure clear all variables when restart. Okay. Then we set the map request answer to the value of that parameter, and then we're done. And then we're listening here on the resource request. We get that value. When we get that value, we say, okay, who sent that request? And then we mine that resource until we're full, and then we return it. I think everything's okay. So we're going to hit yes. We're going to hit yes. We're going to hit yes. We may need to go into our faction registers and clear that in order to get everything to start triggering. Okay, so it doesn't look like we're ever sending out on the resource request, and it doesn't look like we're ever getting an answer, which is interesting. So if we're never getting an answer, then we're never triggering that answer stuff. So we wait for the answer here. But if it doesn't change, why is it going through? Right, because it should be waiting. Ooh, okay. So here's what's happening. This doesn't automatically loop. So we don't get stuck in this unless we explicitly loop it. Or maybe there's a wait component, wait ticks. No. So what we want to do is as we go here, we're just restarting. Ooh, that might be restarting us all the way back up. Interesting. Yeah, I don't think that's restarting us here. So these restarts, so maybe I need to create a closed loop. There it is. So now we've created this sort of closed loop that's going to wait for the answer, because this right here will interrupt this closed loop. So we are creating a situation where if we don't get an answer, we're stuck and we'll sit here forever. But we are going to keep sending this value, right? We're going to keep copying ourselves and the thing we need until we get an answer. So if something gets in the way, then that might work. So we might want to throw a wait in here. Because if we get too many things trying to do this loop, we could get really bogged down. So we want to wait, let's say 100 ticks. Right? That's like a minute. I think it's 50 seconds. Let's take it down. What's 30 seconds? There's 5 ticks per second times 30. So it's 150. So I wasn't even right. That's 30 seconds, right? Because every 50 ticks is 10 seconds, right? So that's 30 seconds right there. So we'll wait 30 seconds before we run that loop again. And that's how we'll keep making sure. Now here's the question. If I'm in the middle of a wait tick, will I trigger the radio event? Because that might end up being a problem. So I hope that this radio event interrupts that wait time. We'll have to check. So we're waiting, and then we're going back, and we're waiting, and we're going back. Until we get the resource that we want. So the same thing is actually going to happen probably inside of this logic. In this subroutine right here, we're going to have this same problem where, oh, this is supposed to be can't fit. Where if we don't loop it manually, then it's just going to get to the exit, or it's just going to get to this point, and it's going to go all the way back out. So we need to lock ourselves into this. Now here's the problem, is because of the ways things seem to work, is I actually think that we're going to interrupt this logic if we get a radio event on this band while we're in here. I think it'll interrupt itself. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that too. And if that is what happens, then we need to find a way to shut that radio down somehow. Pull the band from a parameter and change the band to something innocuous until we're done with the loop, and then we put it back so we can listen again. Something like that will have to be done. But I think all of the logic should be working. So let's try and re-trigger everything. That guy is playing. Why isn't he... Oh, let's stop it. Let's restart it. That's the problem. We were locked. So we send out a request. And then we should be locked waiting for the map response. But we're not getting a map response. Because we seem to be like locked listening to this band. Let's see. We are sending this out on 2, right? No, we're listening on 3. And now we're stuck in the loop again. So we're going to want to stop. We're going to want to go back to the faction. Kill all those. Okay. Let's go ahead and stop that. Start it again. Stop that. Start it again. Then we'll go back over here. We'll start this one. We'll go back to our faction registers. It's saying it's the map requesting unit. And it's requesting a resource. And then it's not making any more progress. So we're getting stuck on our mapper here. Our mapper is listening to band 2. And then it is pulling the map request unit. But it's not running this logic. There's something keeping it, I think, stuck listening to this radio event. Maybe. Which is a little weird. Where's my scout at? My scout's not even turned on. So he's not like picking up resources. So we are listening on this band right here. And when it changes, it should trigger the rest of this logic. It might be triggering the logic, and it might just not be able to figure out what's going on. We also maybe have some dead variables in here. Let's clear all of my variables and sort of restart this. We've got A and B up here. This is for something totally different, so we don't need to redo those. So C, where's my F variable? Kill that. Okay. So we kill all of our variables. So C is going to be the resource we're requesting, and D is going to be who's requesting it. And then we're going to loop to check. And then we're going to compare. Nope. Sorry, we're going to compare. We're going to loop to get a new variable. We're going to compare these two variables. And if they're equal, then we're going to check the distance between our unit and this variable that we got. Whatever that distance is going to go here. If smaller, it gets turned into the new location. And then if all this stuff is right, then boom. So one of the problems is that this starts at 0, and 0 is smaller than everything. So we're never replacing this with a location. This is also the wrong value. Oh, I see. We actually need to be using this value. Not the value of the distance, the value of... Also, why are we setting number? Oh, this is so dumb. So if smaller, we copy the value of that to our parameter. There we go. That's more likely to work. So we hit that. This one is stopped. Our miner is active. That's active. Okay. We go in here. We clear all these values, and then we'll go ahead and trigger that one. Oh, we'll stop it and start it again. We'll go back into our faction variables, and we'll see if we figure anything out. Okay. We are still not pushing a value out. So the problem is that we need to start at a value. We need to start at an extremely high value. For this distance. Because right now we're reading how do I start at one value and then bring this value in. Okay, so before the loop, we need to set that parameter. So before we loop all this memory, hang on. Mother pus bucket. Yo, I'll kill you. Okay, so before we start looping and comparing all these registers, we need to first set a value. Should we just set infinity? I wonder if that works. Let's do 10K. Right, that's an outlandishly large number. And we're going to set that here. And that's going to happen before the loop. So we're always going to compare it to whatever the parameter value is. And then we're going to start adjusting that value. And then whenever we're done, we set no. We're comparing. We're setting the parameter value. Oh, I'm an idiot. We need to be setting this value. Okay, hang on. Then let's try this again without this. Let's pull this copy out of here. I was setting this to the parameter value, which is just a distance, not to the resource value. So everything was getting all jacked up. Although I think we still were probably in an issue there. So let's just leave it like this. And then we're pulling this location and the resource type here. Okay. Goodness. So we're running. We've taken out all of our faction registers. So we should be good. I wish that I could just keep this faction register thing up. Wish there was like a lock. Because when I click this, it goes away, and then I gotta open it again real fast. Okay, so we send out that we need a resource. We are still not getting an answer back. we should be getting map resource answer right here. And because we're not, and I know that it's not this that's the problem right now. I know that it's the worker that's the problem. Because the worker should be sending the value out. And so there's no value in that register, which means the worker is never sending a value, which doesn't make any fudging sense. I think this works, right? I'm comparing the distance value between the location and the unit. Yeah. And this is right. We're looping through that memory. We're checking the distances, or we're checking to see if the values are the same, which they should be. Maybe this is where the problem is. Nothing is coming up equal because I'm using a value that has coordinates on top of a value that's just, okay. So let's separate a register. So when we separate this register, we're taking this register in, and we're just going to put the unit as the output. And so instead of checking all of E, we're just going to check the unit. Now, this may end up not being right because we have the unit and a 0. So hopefully, okay, if we have to, then we might have to just add the number back to it as a 0. I don't think that'll be an issue, but it could be. But let's try this all again. Okay, we send it out. We're still not getting a map answer, which to me says probably we're not checking this still because we don't have our 0. It's also possible that this just isn't classified as a unit. There may be some other things that have to be looked into here. But there's nothing. Oh, it could be an ID. That might be it. Let's check that. Let's set that to G. And let's save. And then we go into our factions and we clear all this. Then we come over here and we stop and we start again. This one's already started. Good. This one's already started. Good. Boom. Then we go right back into our faction registers. All right. And we're not getting anything. That's fine. We kind of thought that might happen. We probably just need to set number. So setting a number sets the number or coordinate part of a value. So what you're going to get here is you've separated this register that used to have a number part of its value. And you've taken that away. Hold up. God, this is such a pain in the ass. So I actually might not need to do... So we're separating, but we already had a number part of this. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then 2G, we're going to add the number value we already had. And that's going to give us that value. And then we're going to compare. The I register to the register we fed in. Goodness gracious. This is a clusterfuck. If it works, I'll have to clean it up. But for now, okay, then we check the distance between this location and this location. Okay. Maybe now it'll work. Probably not. Stop it, start it, go back to our faction variables. Looks like a no-go. Gosh, I'm having a really hard time here. It's very important to be able to find the closest resource to somebody. I'm dumb again. No, I'm not. Yep, I am. We were setting E to the parameter. Okay, so now we're setting F to the parameter so we can recompare it. And then E is, okay. Too many fudging variables. Whoops. All right, give it to me. I hate you. So there's a very specific reason that I'm using this image as the map resource request image. And it's because those are the images that this registers in its ID here. But I'm having a really hard time getting these things to compare properly. Now that should mean, hold up. So even if it's not reading the values properly, eventually it should just feed me a value anyway. Right? Because when it's done, if it gets nothing, eventually it should just give me the last one. So it must not even be coming into this event. So maybe something needs to be on program start. Right? Maybe it can't just be chilling. Maybe I need to be like waiting. We'll do one tick. Whoops. We'll just wait one tick over and over. And so now it's up here instead of here, so it can be interrupted, maybe? I honestly, at this point, have no fucking clue. Uh... Doesn't look like it. That is unfortunate. Okay, so it seems to me that the logic that's broken is this logic right in here. When we're looking up here, this is number 2. So we should be triggering this radio event. This should absolutely be going off. But we're not. So we trigger the event, we get the thing. What if, let's just put that to the visual. Let's break this off. And let's just see. Am I even getting any data? Am I doing a thing or not? We're going to clear value. We're going to set that up. I'm going to stop. Start. Okay. So we are triggering. That's happening. That's great. And we're triggering properly, right? We're getting this value and we're setting it up there. So let's get rid of that. And let's turn that back into shit. D. Yeah, that's definitely D. Okay, cool. We know that we're going that far. Then we're looping our memory under this. I know this works. And we're pulling the value out. Let's get rid of this. And then we just want to compare those, right? C is the value we're looking for. E is the value in the ID. And we're comparing them. And then we're checking the distance, right? If they're equal. If they're different, nothing. We just go back. So regardless, this should always be returning something. And it's weird that it's not. Oh, it should actually always be returning the same thing. Because I'm an idiot. Like an enormous idiot. So I'm checking all of these values to see which one is the right one. But the value I'm copying is the distance. So I also need to be copying. Fuck, I'm dumb. I also need to be copying another value, which is the actual unit, up to here. And then if that's the right unit, we go down here. Because otherwise I'm just always sending the final bit, which might actually be a null value. So that might be why I keep getting null, because I keep triggering the last value is like a null value. Because I'm an asshole. Nope. Doesn't matter, still doesn't work. This is still going. This shouldn't still be on its visual. Thought I took that off. Let's stop this. Let's go back in here. Let's kill all this shit again. And let's start it. Please. Mother mucking work. Why do you hate me? I don't even understand. Haven't I given you enough love? Your love is lifting me higher. Than I've ever been lifted before. Fuck, 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 fuck. Anybody have an answer here? Do any of you know how to fix my stupidity problem? I know how to fix my stupidity problem. I'm copying or setting to a component, not copying like I'm supposed to. Because this used to be set up for transmitters. And that was my problem. I mean, obviously, I fixed some other problems. But map request answer, nope, that's the target. Map request answer is parameter 2. Boom, saved it, done. Holy fudge. Check this out. Y'all ready? Play it. Send me a value. Come on, send me a value. Pretty please. Send me a value. Still not sending me a value. I hate you. Okay. I know something we can check here real quick. And that is that it's likely that I did need to do whatever those changes are. To get this comparison to work properly. Because if this comparison isn't working, then we're kind of screwed. Right? Right. Also, yeah, so the thing we need to do is we need to adjust this register. But let's find a way to check that first. So the best way to check that is just also let's see, what's our final resource here? Can I just view this? But we'll just move this to the done. And if moving this to the done, like, fixes it, then I'd say that's pretty reasonable to say, okay, somewhere in my logic for comparing these values is broken. Can I, like, delete things from here? Nope. Okay. So we're going to copy that value in right there, just like that. And if that works, then we know we're fucked up. Oh. Hang on. Let's stop this. What are we doing? Okay. Clear all these valuables. Why are you putting a valuable in? Oh, because I changed it. Right. Okay, so that is working. Because when you delete it, you change it. So I put it in there. And it got the location. And now my other isn't putting it in the request. So the reason that's probably happening, we're probably still locked in this wait. We are. So, no wait. Close that, kill that. Save it up. Then we turn that off. Turn that off. So those waits don't get interrupted, which is unfortunate. The interrupts must come between nodes, and they can't come in the middle of wait nodes. So we get that value. That should turn that resource request, right? Oh, now we're stuck in a permanent loop here. Damn. So it's just doing these, and it's never breaking out into this radio event, which is weird because I feel like it should be, right? It should be listening inside of here. That makes me think that maybe inside of a subroutine, you might not be able to listen to radio events, which would be pretty unfortunate because I don't want this progressing. I mean, I guess we can have this progressing. So we get out of this. Oops. So the thing is that I don't really want this progressing. If I don't have that response. Of course, I guess that does mean we can just put the radio right here. And then we can wait for band 3, which is our answer. And we get that signal. And then we get self. We're actually going to get rid of this. And get rid of this. And then we're going to move these. So now we're listening on that radio signal for this. But here's the thing, is once we get to here and we send this APB out, I don't want to loop this again. I want to break out. So I guess we also don't really need this. Right, we could just copy this because it's just get self, copy to the value, and then we're just waiting for the response. So we can just clear out of here. We can remove this. And then we can just paste these right in here. No problemo. And that's probably fine. We send the what value? We're sending ourselves, and we're sending the resource we want, which is this one. And then we're just waiting for a response and going. And this will re-trigger and keep running this over and over. And I don't really want that, but it's fine. And then we're copying ourself, and we're copying the location we get back to the resource. Right? Because this should be resource request, and this should be resource request unit. And we can save that. And we're going to turn this whole thing off. We're going to turn this off. We're going to reset all of these register values. And then we should be able to just hit play here. And hopefully this time it'll make it all the way to the miner. Forgot to hit play there. Whoops. Okay. Stop that one. Stop that one. Reset these values again. Play this one. Play this one. Check these values. We get our location. We request the resource. And then our guy goes to get it. Perfect. Okay. And that was fine, because even though this was looping, we were kind of good there. So that seems like it's okay. There's going to need to be some cleanup and stuff, but it seems to kind of be working. The thing that's the problem is we're always going to go to the same location because we're only ever getting this final resource, right? So we're going here. We're never going to any of these others. And that's because our register that we're comparing is off. And so I don't precisely know what to break out of these bits to get just the value of what we were requesting. Because this right here is just that, the ID and the 0. So I feel like we just break out. Let's see. Let's try going simple here. We're comparing, and so we just need to separate and then combine. Separate a register and then combine a register. And so we're separating this register and we're getting the ID and we're getting the number. And then we're combining. Well, that's interesting. There's no unit or no ID. So maybe it's the unit that is the thing there. So we get the unit and the number and we put it on there. And then the output is what we check instead. Here's hoping. And so in order to check this whole rigmarole, we clear these values. And then we go back up here, and that guy checks. We go over here, that guy goes. And then we go right back up into here. And we're getting no value. Oh. Fuck yeah. Okay, so we sent that value, but it didn't send properly. Something went wrong because the engineer didn't go there. Oh, that's because the engineer is off. That's why. Okay. 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 We might have figured it out here, boys and girls. We might have figured it out. We're going to turn that guy on. That guy's turned on. Turn that guy on. And now we get back our response. And then we tell us where to go. Why isn't the engineer going? Go to the fucking place! I will murder you. Stupid ass little robot. Okay. I had my little outburst. I feel better now. Okay, so we're back in here. Hang on. Okay. Okay, so we're back in here. No, it seems like it checked well, and it did the thing. But I might be setting up the ID wrong. Oh, it's because I was never copying. Right, I forgot to set up the copy value again. So how was it sending? What value was it setting in this parameter? That's interesting. Because I'm not... Right, I'm just setting the distance value. I was never setting a value to P2. P2 is just dropping what should be an empty value here. So how was it ever getting a value? That doesn't even make any sense. But that's fine. We're going to copy to parameter 2. We're going to copy that from this all the way over here, this loop. Okay. That should be right. I am fairly certain that that's the way it needs to be. So we go here. We go here. We go back to checking. I don't know why the map resource was actually triggering. I also don't know why it's suddenly not triggering. Oh my god. Why does everything suck? Okay. So there's something wrong with the way I'm doing this comparison. And the problem is ultimately that I can't figure out how to match what I'm getting from my array to what I'm trying to compare. Because I only want to compare resources that are of the type that I'm looking for. So potentially, one of the things I could look at here is separating this array when it's created based on the type of resource. And so instead of just putting resources in here, I can set this up as the ID. And that will probably compare well. And so for the loop, I would be able to pull the signal value as the ID for the loop. And then I don't have to compare anything but the distances as I'm deciding which value to give. And I think that will probably work. But that will require completely reworking my mapping. And so let's see what we do here. Oh, this actually isn't the worst thing in the world. Oh, no, because we still have to do the comparison. Because we're pulling in here a location. So basically what I'm needing to do is either at this point right here, where I pull in a location that's attached to a resource, I need to separate it out into just the type ID that I could use here as the array, right? And then I'd have multiple layers of the array, one layer for each different resource. Or I need to be able to do it here so that I can only check the resources that I want. I actually think I want to do it up here, but I still have to be able to break that apart so that I can just turn that into the thing. Now, the other possibility is that this ID variable could potentially be small enough that it will only take in the ID portion of this, thus creating the value I want here. So we're going to check that. We're actually going to bomb this array, clear the array. And then this is going to start to be the ID because this is the signal I pull in from them. And then based on that ID, I loop the values. If the value I got is the same as the value that's already in there, then we restart. And we go back up here, basically. We also don't need that. And if it's different, then we go back to the beginning of the loop. And if it's never the same, then we just, boom, put it in. And if we restart, we won't come back to this because we can only come to here when it changes. So basically, if we ever find that we already have a resource location, we do not add it to the array. So actually, I thought this was going to take much more working. But then we just, if we're adding it, we're doing memory insert to this array right here. And we're adding the value. Actually. Ooh. Well, let's hope that that just works. Right? Let's just hope that that just works. And we'll close that. And we'll turn this back on. And then we're going to get our scout. And we're going to turn... Is this our... Yes, it is. So here's the problem that we're looking at here. What the fuck? Oh, we're comparing if it has 10,000 of a number. And then we're not setting this component anymore. If we find a resource with equal or larger, then we just copy that shit to scout resource. Loop units in range. Yep. So that's it. That should be good. Then we're going to go ahead and save that, and we're going to play it. I'm going to go over here to the worker, and I'm going to check the array. is this the proper signal to be listening to? Okay. The scout is not writing any resources to that value. Although it did just say that it did. So if it's saying that it's writing the resources to the scout resource value, why isn't it changing? I don't fucking understand. Because even if it's not actually going into the array, that's potentially going to be expected. But it's not sending anything even to the scout resource variable, which means this shouldn't even be triggering because nothing's changing, which doesn't make any sense. And it does seem to be thinking, oh, because I'm a jackass. There we go. I put the value in the target. Nice. Do you see that? It did pull the right value. Okay. So now let's go try and like get some crystals in there. And let's see. Honestly, the array is going to be looking real schmexy once we get this set up right. Let's see if we can find a latinite or a laterite that has a good enough value. There's one. Yeah, boy. All right. And then we'll go check our worker out. And let's see what you've got in your array. Oh, nice. Oh. Nope. It also doesn't. Nope, there's the laterite. Damn. Okay. So what's happening there is it's creating, because it's got all of those different values, including like coordinate values and stuff. It's creating the array ID for each one. So what we want to do is we want to separate this register and just pull its ID out. If we just pull its ID out, then we should be able to use that as the ID here and that as the index here. So let's go back into memory. Let's clear the memory again. Let's save it all up. Let's hit the scout. And then let's just go see if we're even getting an array. It probably already had this value here. So we have to get to a point where we can change it. So let's change our value. Okay, we want to get this value. And we're going to go look at our array. Oh, whoops. We'll get there eventually. Um. Oh. Oh. Nope. Okay, we should be separating that register, getting the ID, looping and inserting. But we're not inserting because we're not catching. There's nothing going to the index. So the ID is not the right thing. So let's try the unit being the thing instead. And then save that. And then show me what you got. We should be next to 2. Yeah, we're close enough to 2 things. Okay. So it is separating at least by type. Now I have all of those registered. So now we want to go back to another metal. And we want to see if it's picking that up. Okay, it's still sending them to different locations. I just want to use type. That's all I want. Which I would think would be the ID, but apparently not. Fuck Knuckles, dude. Fuck Knuckles. Is it possible to get... Yeah, I really just don't know. I really just don't know. The comparison of this. So this explains why none of this was working though. Because you're not able to compare these, right? It's not apples to apples. And so we weren't just looking at the nodes that we wanted. We were basically looking at nothing and then just dumping nothing into the value. And so that makes sense. So the thing that we have to solve now is breaking apart these resources into a usable ID. And so these types are typically, oh, you can shrink those. That's nice. So normally when I set up an ID, right, you can set the ID up as one of these types. And I like that very much. It works really good. And so I want to separate, right? It's obviously using the type as part of it because that's what it's showing here. But there's additional information in this unit part of the variable that's fucking it up. And so if I can scrub whatever that is, I don't know if it's a coordinate. No, it's not the coordinate value because that's the XY. It's not the numerical ID. That's this. It's not any sort of other number because that would be this. So what is it about this unit variable that's different than this type indicator? And how can I break that? What sort of comparison can I do? Can I get just a type? Get unit type. Holy shit, is that the fucking answer? I might not even need this separate register. Let's set this as J. Let's clear that. J goes here, J goes here. Oh, God, please let this be the fucking answer. Okay. So now we gotta go get something to change. We'll get right over here because, again, we want to get both the crystal and the metal. And then we'll come over here and we'll just look at this. We'll take a look. We've got the metal. We've got the crystal. Okay, we picked up both of those. They went into different zones here. Please, please let this work. Oh, fucking A right. Fucking A right, dude. We got it. So all we needed to do was pull the type. It's ridiculous that it took me that long to figure that out. But in my defense, I've never gotten a unit type like that before. So I didn't even know that was a node. But that's the deal right there. So here's the thing now. All of this goes away. Boom. Now we're just comparing distances. So because we're only pulling... Okay, this is great. So now we get type again, right? Because it's making a request for, well, it's making a request for a type of resource. So we actually don't even have to get type. That's just the ID. We've already got the type. And then, what is this value? Okay, this is the value of the unit. That's making the request, which we use as part of this. Okay, we get our values, we check the distance. We check the distance against the 10,000 that it starts at. If it's smaller than that, we reset the value of the distance, as well as setting the value of the resource that we want. So that's the distance value, that's the resource value, and then boom, when we're all done, we copy right there. Okay. I feel like that's actually correct. So we're going to stop that one. We're going to stop, this one's already stopped. We're going to go ahead and stop our scout because I don't want it interfering. We can go ahead and turn that back on in a little bit. But then we're going to go into our faction registers. We're going to clear all this shit. We're going to go over here to the worker. I'm going to turn that bad boy back on. Turn that bad boy back on. And then manage it. Everything got sent. The engineer is on, but it did not go to a location. However, it did receive some sort of data. Because here's that. Oh, it's even right here. I don't understand. If you received that, why aren't you going there? You're actually locked in. Oh. It's because, okay. So previously, he was, so this doesn't break you out. Because he's been in this loop for a while now. Okay. So we also need to stop him. Because he never went and turned his resources in. He's all fucked up. We'll have to find a way to break out of that loop at some point, so that when something like that happens, we don't get all jacked up. But we're going to go back up here. We're going to go here. Boom, 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 boom. Close all that down. All right. Engineer runs. Worker runs. This guy runs. Check it out in the faction. We figure it out. Boom, we do it. Oh, there goes the loot. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Little worker dude is going to gather that stuff up. Fuck yeah. It works. And we know that it did actually pick the closest one, because it could have picked this one. That's also part of this dude's register. So now we've got all kinds of options, because this map, let's actually turn this map on. Let's go wander around and pick up some more stuff. Like we might want to get this right here. Anyway, so this is great, because this map is now going to be able to do a lot of stuff for us, because we have the location of every large resource node that there is. Let's take a look at where things are at right now. So this is just constantly rerunning this and saying, hey, I need this resource. Hey, I need this resource, which I think is okay. And then this one is just waiting. Nothing's changing right now, because this is sending out the same signal that it's always been sending out. And then this guy is trapped in his little gathering stuff loop. Okay, so he doesn't know where to drop things off at. Or he went to go drop them off and then it just exited. Because the destination is P2, drop-off location. So the resource coordinate thing worked, but it doesn't look like going and dropping off worked. So if we can't fit anymore, we break out of our loop, right? We can't fit anymore. We go drop off items, exit, and then it's just done. So I need to complete this before I move on to exit. And I don't know necessarily how to do that. You can wait for a component to finish something. But that's not really what we're looking for. We just want to like halt at this spot. And I don't think we can. So I think it just breaks us out of our subroutine, and then we don't go anywhere. We could do an is moving check, maybe. Like if moving wait. Maybe that could save us there. So we could do it if not moving, exit. If moving, that might be doable. Let's turn all these off. When I'm exiting, I might actually be exiting all the way out of the behavior. I might need to restart instead of exit from this behavior. I thought it would just exit out of this, but I think it's actually exiting out of its parent, which I don't like. So if we're not moving, we restart. We also want to copy this. Just in case we upgrade. We hit a restart if we're not moving. And then we hit a restart if we're not moving. Okay. That seems reasonable. We don't want that anymore. Oh, yeah, we do, actually. Because we only want to break out if we're not done. Okay. So engineer is going to get turned on. Actually turned off. We're going to go in here. We're going to clear everything. Oh, he's over there standing right next to that. Okay. We're going to turn on that guy. We're going to turn on this guy. We're going to turn on this guy. And it should take us all the way through that loop again. Okay, we get our dude. Hey, and then we come over here. And we drop everything off. Ooh, that's interesting. So he keeps moving enough that as he keeps cycling, he actually came back to get more resources instead of breaking out. That's kind of interesting. I wonder... So we need to put some logic in this guy that makes sure that he drops off, but also make sure that he only does like one trip. And then if this dude's going to need more resources, that's fine. But we only want the engineers to be making one trip in case we fill up. We don't want to have extra. At some point, we're going to have to figure out a way to make sure that we're only getting enough to fill up the storage. So, because something we don't want, okay, we did leave out. So we weren't moving there. And we left out, even though we could have gone and deposited. So there's some issues with the logic the way it is. It definitely needs to be worked on. But we have made some pretty good strides in the realm of flexibility here. Because, so number one, the mining stuff and the thing that's figuring out where we're dropping off is resource type agnostic. The scouting is now resource agnostic. The request for resources is now resource agnostic. And so because of all of that, it doesn't matter if we're using a resource that's getting metal, or if we're using something that's getting crystal, or if we're using, something that's getting anything. These are all resource agnostic now. The other thing that we now have the potential ability to do, because we know about types, and because we can get types, this is interesting. So not only am I going to want to be keeping a map of the world, but I actually kind of want to keep a map of the structures. At the very least, storage structures. I don't really know. But because eventually we're going to need to be getting resources moving around places, right? We're going to be getting runners and stuff like that to go pick shit up from certain storages and then deliver them to other storages. And so we're going to kind of be running the same bit of logic that I'm running for requesting mineable resources. But instead, I'm going to want to request, like, resources that are manufactured, refined resources, and move them to places to go make other things. And if I'm going to be doing that, I'm going to need an understanding of where all of my buildings are and what's in them. So I'm probably going to have to start using some visual registers, maybe. We're going to have to start thinking about making blueprints that are going to have visual registers on them. Visual registers are going to be able to help us a lot with like cleanup and stuff. So, like, for example, my engineer has more resources than this storage wants. So potentially he could say, okay, I have these extra resources. I'm done with my drop off. Can I now go find some other thing to go drop these resources off at using, just a local visual area with the visual indicators? I don't know. We'll have to look. But it's all about getting stuff that's really flexible like this, right? We don't want to have to make multiple engineers or multiple gathering units in general that are designed specifically for a resource, right? We want that to be completely whatever. We do, I think, want to make storages for specific resources. That way we can kind of control how much we have and, keep things a little clean in that way. Something that I'm interested in maybe doing is creating blocks of these storages. And because you can put the integrated teleporter thing in these, you could actually have it set up where this one is like the one that calls things. And then this one could be an output. And so you could just load it, right? You could have it be as big as you wanted. So you've got input, you've got output, and then you could just trail this all the way out here and loop it. And then you could have as much storage as you wanted for an individual resource. And then this one right here would always be full because everything would always get transported down this way. Like, right, you're making a bus basically for your resource. And then the output is always wherever. And then you have one place for your vehicles to come and pick stuff up. And then you've got one place for your engineers to drop shit off. And then this is the only one that's ever making resource calls because it's the only one checking itself to see if it's empty or not. And if it finds out it's empty, then it says, hey, come fill me up. And then this dude just fills it up and it keeps transmitting resources out. And then it keeps making calls saying, hey, I still need more. I still need more. And then, it just keeps going until you fill up the whole bus. But we're already kind of set up in a way where we can make that happen. As far as making an array of structures, specifically structures that are going to do certain things, we're going to have an interesting time with that. Because I don't just want all storage units. I want all storage units that are accepting or giving metal ore, right? I want all factories that are building whatever. I want a lot of stuff. I also, something else we're going to need is in small local areas. We're also probably going to want a unit that will run around and go places to set different structures to certain crafting objectives. And the reason for that is if a building needs something, right? If a structure needs something made, and there's another structure that's kind of idling near it, we might be able to get like a little runner robot who maybe just has a really local area map. And this might be a good way to deal with that, is just have a local visual area map. Or we could have a unit that has a building that has a local area visual map and then just tells this runner to go set things to certain stuff or something. Because you have to be standing right next to something to set remotely its stuff. I don't know. I don't know if we'd be able to do that. If we could do that, then we'd probably be able to just do it remotely. But yeah, I mean, we could like send out a request. We're going to be using a lot of faction variables. That's fairly obvious. Because right now I'm only using my scout to put out resources. But eventually I'm going to have like 3 or 4 things for this scout to be posting. And then my map is going to keep a bunch of arrays that have lots of stuff. But it's looking really good. I'm pretty excited. And I am still looking for teammates. So if anybody else wants to come help get this automation stuff going on, let me know. We will be attempting to compete with other people who are also automating things. I'm hosting this private server. It's got a password and everything, so it's just going to be us in here working on our scripts. And then as we get like better and better and better, and further along, I'm going to keep putting out. I put out a video yesterday, late last night, for the phase 1, which is just setting up a base in a good spot. So you get 1 point for every 1,000 resources within the loop nearby resources node when you put your base down. You get 5 points per different type of resource in that area. And then you lose a point for every 10 seconds that it takes for you to find an area. And then once you hit play on everything, right, you're allowed to put different scripts on each of your 4 starting resources. Or sorry, each of your 4 starting bots, including your command center bot. But once you hit play on all those, then that's it. No more manual intervention. So it's got to be all automated. It's got to find a good spot. It's got to do it quickly. And then we'll figure out how many resources are right around it. And then that'll be your score. But it's a pretty cool little problem to look at. And I think there's going to be a lot of optimization involved in that. and I think it's going to be pretty fun. I got to use the restroom. I'll be right back. All right, we back. My brain's a little bit fried from a lot of the stuff we've been working on today. So I'm not really interested in continuing to work on the automation stuff. Um, it's too much. But I also don't want to end this stream after such a short period of time. This game is a little weird because of some of the stuff we're doing with it. And because this game just really takes a lot to play the way that I'm playing it. I suppose that I could spend some of the time just doing, regular manual RTS stuff. I mean, this base hasn't changed in fucking days. It's just looked the same because we got to a certain point and then we didn't really need any more structures or anything. I actually didn't even need to get to where I am. Now that I understand faction registers better, I feel really good about the early game automation. I was a little worried that I was going to have to be really deterministic with my early game automation stuff. But it doesn't seem like that's the case. One of the next issues that I kind of want to start thinking about tackling is identifying when it's time to expand and when we need to make more buildings of different types. So one of the things we're going to need to do is we're going to need to identify, how many resources do we have? How many resources are around us to exploit? We need to really understand the state of our faction as well as the state of the world around us. And then make decisions about what we're going to do next. And that is going to be an extremely complex problem to overcome because it's about, building new buildings. It's about, increasing the size of buses and stuff like that. Can I even set? So here's an interesting problem that we'll need to look at is if I build another building here, so I can set, if I had an integrated transporter here, I could set to an external building that bus. But I don't think I can do, sorry, I don't think I can do that. If I go in here and I set a link, I guess maybe I could pull in. Yeah, these are components. So I can't set a link to another building from inside my behavior unless I could set a link to a parameter that was like tied to another building location, but I don't think that would work. So I don't know how I would set up if I wanted to build another storage here and then link the transmitter and create a bus and then grow that bus as I was playing. How would I automate that? I don't know that I could. So I might just have to create a bus size and then copy it as a blueprint. And then that's just as big as they're ever going to get. They're always going to be that same size. And then I just decide, okay, how many resources do I have? Divide by the size of my bus sizes. Okay, I know I have 8 of these. And I have, 20 of the buildings creating metal plates, and I need 9 of these to accommodate 20 buildings, so I need to build another bus or something like that. There's going to be a shitload of math involved, and I'm real bad at math, so we're going to see. We're gonna fucking see. But there's just an insane amount of work to do to get this thing automated. If I can get all the way up to where I can just make a small base, right? I just want to build a little base, and I want that base to be self-sustaining. And that's really where I'm at right now, right? I want to build out this whole little area right here. And I want all of my buildings to be able to say, hey, I need a resource. Or, hey, I need to build something. And then I want some sort of command and control function that's looking at, all my units, all my buildings, all my resources, all my fighters, all my gatherers, all that stuff. And I want to just looking around saying, okay, what's my state? What's the next play? Do I build more little dudes? Do I build more fighters? Do I build more gatherers? Where are my bottlenecks and stuff like that? And that's going to require a lot of math because decision making is in a lot of ways mathematics, especially when you're decision making based on optimization towards a goal. So as long as you can identify what the goal you're trying to get to is, and then you can identify all the things, identify and quantify all the things that can help you get to that goal, then it's just a little bit of math to get you to, what's the thing I need to do to increase my progress towards that goal the most. And, this game doesn't have just one goal. So we will be looking at, here's a list of my goals. Here's my progress towards those goals. Here's some of the steps where my progress is flagging. Do one. But there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, right? That's a really simplified. but I think it can be done. When I first got on to the Discord, there was a little bit of naysaying going on. And I was a little bit disheartened. But I actually, now that I understand this faction register thing, I am much more heartened. Arrays and faction registers are definitely the enabling aspects of creating a fully automated run. Seems like the Discord is actually getting much more active, though, which is cool. The game, I thought it came out in January or February, but it actually did only come out at the beginning of March in its 1.0. But it seems like there's a lot more people talking in the Discord, especially the behaviors chat. The, people talking about how do I automate this or that or the other thing is really, really active, which is super cool. I'm really excited to hopefully have more people wanting to play in the Automation League and getting some of that. Like I said, I am still looking for people to join my team and help me automate this on this dedicated server. So if you look in here, we've got a bunch of folders. So Droid, who is typically in the chat, I haven't seen him around today. They might just be listening though. Is helping me out. So this is their work in progress set of scripts. This is my work in progress set of scripts. We've got needs review scripts, which this is just an empty one so that the folder stays. And then we've got our production scripts. So right now we don't actually have any production scripts. Mostly because we're just not kind of far enough along to have something that we'd want all the way into production. Probably I should go back to working on my base build, like my initial script, because as you all probably have seen, the script that I'm using in the video to set up for the Automation League, the first phase, which is just building your base. I'm using like a guess and check method where I just move 10 spaces and then check how many resources are there. And then I move randomly 10 more spaces, which potentially just brings me right back to where I was. And so there's a lot of repetition. It's not a good algorithm. So I should probably work on that and try and get like the absolute best version that I can of that. We'll see. I may also just steal one of the ones that people submit as part of the Automation League. We'll see. That is another part of why I want to run all these phases for the Automation League, is we could find that there are some things that are better in certain situations. Well, not we could find, we will find that some things are better in some situations than others. And so depending on the seed you end up competing on, those little differences will compound over time. So there's going to be a lot of decision making, right? Because there are algorithms that we know are the best pattern for scouting, right? We know that certain grid sizes and stuff like that make for the best possible coverage with the least amount of movement. And you can go on the internet and you can find those algorithms and you can implement them here in the game. But there is a lot of difference. A lot of those algorithms are specifically used to like search for survivors in search and rescue situations and stuff like that. And so the goal of those algorithms is slightly different than the goal here. And the environments that those algorithms are being used in are slightly different than this environment. And so there will be times where maybe starting with something not quite the best, but the best in a small niche way might actually be a better option. And that might be the difference that allows you to win a competition. And so those things are going to compound, right? You're going to have lots of different combat algorithms. You're going to have lots of different expansion algorithms. You're going to have lots of different, scouting and exploring algorithms, not just for setting up your first base, but also for just mapping the world. And so, how do you, when you're doing your mapping, for example, how are you going to want to do that, right? Are you going to want to start right next to your base and map 100% as you go out in a squared circle, right? And just search the entire fucking map so you could see everything? Or do you want to go in a grid so that you can see enough, right? So that people have to pass your grid in certain places so you can track them that way instead? Or do you want to know 100% of what's around you? How are you going to set up your, you're going to need like relays and stuff like that, where you've got structures that are built out here that are going to be picking up enemy troop movements and then relaying data back and saying, hey, we've got, maybe they'll be way out here, right? Super far away from your main base. But then, there might be some troops, and it checks all the troop types. Maybe it checks the equipped components and then sends that data back like, hey, this isn't a mining party. This is a kill squad. And then you have the data on where they are. I don't even know if they go into the fog of war, right? If you don't have something with vision, I wonder if it'll drop your ability to chase those units. That'll be something interesting, and something we'll have to consider modding. So we don't want people to necessarily be able to like keep an array of all of your units that they found and then just decide to send a unit towards one of your units. And even if it's in the fog of war, it'll go find it, right? Because that would be really kind of game breaking, and would reduce the need for scouting and stuff like that. Because if I see a pack of enemy units coming out this way, and I've got, like a scout tower here, and that scout tower sees them and says, hey, some shit's going down, then, my base is way over here. So by the time I send units out here, your units are somewhere else. So now I've got to kind of scout from this point to see if I can find you, to see if I can take out whatever that combat group is before it gets to my base. And so, there's a lot of stuff. And so if I can see your units here, and then I can just give you a reference to that unit, and then even if you go into the fog of war, my combat units can just go find you. That's a little busted. And then I could even do stuff like not come fight you right away. I could just find that unit and store its reference. And then when I feel like it, like if I want to find your base, I could just send a runner after it. And then the runner will get killed probably, but it'll find your base location. And we don't necessarily want that. So we'll see. There's lots of little stuff to think about. This automation league is going to be really fun. I'm really excited. I think phase 2 is going to be a race to complete all of the research in this first square here. So you have to figure out what resources you need and what steps you need to take to get those resources, and how many gatherers, do you need to make extra gatherers? Do you need to make extra buildings? How do you go through all that? What's the best path to get all of these? So I'll try and write a script for that. It's going to be a pretty hard-coded script, because this is one of those things that's going to happen in your early game, very consistently the same way. The only thing that might be a little different is getting your first set of data cubes so that you can do your first set of research with your data cubes. Because you need 5, I think. Yeah, you need 5 to do this gateway technology. And so you'll have to do enough exploring to get 5 data cubes. And so you need to have, honestly, this will be the thing that you need to focus on the most, I think, is getting a good scouting, explorable code going on. And then everything else is just, counting up how many resources do I need to make all of the things that I need. And so how much storage do I need, and how many crafting buildings do I need? And then just getting all that stuff made, gathering up all your cubes, and then just fucking pumping it all out real quick. But that'll be a really interesting one. I'm fairly excited about that. And then, once we're there, it's about more research. It's about expansion. It's about, getting to the mothership or repairing the mothership or whatever. Clearing some of those quests. Somebody brought up doing a nomad run, which could be cool. There's an actual nomad format in the game, and it's got a specific quest that it wants you to complete. We have PvE, like swarm type stuff that would be interesting to compete on, to see how far you can go against the swarm with total automation. There's just so many cool things, so many different automation competitions that we can have. But that's probably going to be it for the day. I don't really have the brain power to keep going on more automation. 3.5 hours is about all I got in me. So thanks everybody for coming out today. We made some really good progress on getting our people to fulfill requests. Now that we have that done, we can do a lot of different types of requests and still follow kind of that same format. So that'll be cool. So yeah, I hope everybody has a great rest of their day. I'll see you all tomorrow for the next one, where we will be trying to expand on this a little bit and really get it working. So I hope everybody has a great day, and I will see you all in the next one.